Good job, Joshua.
I recorded it with my brain.
That's okay. So why do bad things happen to good people? I think it's because the universe has freedom, and because God creates through suffering. Because the other one's not an explanation for evil. What it does is it kind of excuses God of it. God's not responsible for the evil of the world. God is a victim of sin himself. And that's what Christianity says. God is a victim of sin. Being a victim of sin, you can't blame God. It's like blaming the victim. You could say, well, why did God create a world where things are free? And that's just because God is love. Again, love wills the independent. Take John 4 where it says God is love. Combine it with 1 Corinthians where it says love does not control. Love is.
Use Bible.
Love is patient. Love is kind. I mean, if you think about God as love, and then you think about this. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. It is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interests. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That's what love is. Well, that's a being that, if God is love, then God is all those things. Well, that's a being that gives freedom to other things. It's not really a matter of God not being all-powerful. That's the end result. But it's not really. It's about God being true to God's self. If God forced himself on the universe, if God kept the universe from being able to make any mistakes, and human moral errors are just are a part of that, right? Then God is no longer love, because God wills the independence of the other. Is there anything else y'all want to comment on that? Is that helpful? Mm-hmm. I hope if y'all approach that question with that issue, I think you really have a chance to touch people, because most people don't have a good answer to that question. I feel like I do have a good answer to that question. That's also the beauty or the value of being able to take science and religion and say, I don't have to give either one of them up, because science is the one that tells us that the whole universe is kind of going through this evolutionary process, and therefore a process that involves freedom. You have anything to comment?
No, just reading the Corinthians passage in particular, that love is not jealous, and just caught me, because there's a lot of references in the Old Testament.
A jealous God. God is kana. God is jealous. Yeah, that's a problem. It's a problem. There's no real easy way to reconcile those two things. But I would encourage you to look in the original Hebrew and the original Greek, because you're going to find out that a lot of that stuff's questionable at least in the Hebrew side, less than the Greek. There's only 10,000 words in Hebrew. So
every word has like 4 or 5 meanings. And
also, most words are made. Most of what we have, one word in our Bible is a string of several words together. So, go there. You can go online and actually look at the original, the transliteration of your favorite biblical book. It's a freaking mess. Go look it up. Like the original Hebrew transliterated, is being as being is was that can be. I mean, those kinds of things are what the original Hebrew actually says, and then they have to tease out from the context what the heck the person's actually trying to say. But that's exactly what it's like. Is, was, and he that should be what, and can be. I mean, that's the kind of random words that these people strung together to then mean other things. You know,
talking about a contextual language.
It's crazy. It's you. If you can translate Hebrew, God bless you. But yeah, that's a problem. Abortion. Anyways, on to abortion. I think that the most important thing about, there's some things too that you can sit there and try to move around. We're going to talk about those. I think that one thing I would do with all these I'm about to talk about is make a distinction between the legal argument or political argument and the moral argument, right? say that there are things, like I would say, for instance, the example I would use is, I'm morally opposed to drinking in any way, shape, or form. I don't think anybody should drink ever. And I have good biblical and moral reasons why I believe that. However, I don't therefore think that drinking should be illegal. I think that there is a difference between a moral argument and a legal argument. There are things that we recognize as, even though we don't like them, and we morally reprobate them, we say that they're morally wrong, we recognize that giving the state the ability to limit them legally has its own moral consequences that are greater. Does that make sense? So I would really strongly encourage you on a lot of things to stop for a second and say, we want to distinguish between a legal argument and a moral argument. And I would encourage y'all to make those. You understand what I'm saying? Not everything I think is morally wrong do I think should be illegal. Another example is pornography. I think pornography is terrible. I think it's one of the most horrible things that we do in the West. I do not think pornography should be illegal, because giving the state the ability to limit people's expression on that level limits a lot of other things too. And it gives state the power I don't want it to have. I think there should be no pornography market. I think pornography, it shouldn't matter whether it's legal or not. I think more people of good conscience should abstain from it to the point that they won't do it anymore because they won't make any money off of it. Right? I mean, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's how I think that's there's so many Christians, people who go to church and who believe in Jesus Christ, who watch pornography and stuff. And that's bad. And if we just stopped doing that, if every person who called themselves a Christian never watched porn, the market would shrink so small, it wouldn't just exist anymore. No one would make pornography because no one would make money at it. Right? Mm-hmm. But recognizing that it's morally wrong is different from saying I think it should be illegal. Does that stuff make sense?
Yeah.
So I think when dealing with abortion too, now I believe that abortion is morally wrong in most cases. I would make some exceptions. But I also think, I think there should be some strict legal controls on abortion. I think abortion should be only legal in very restricted situations. This is my own personal belief. I would say, however, I recognize that people of good conscience and other Christians can disagree on where that legal line should be drawn. Does that make sense?
So you and I had a discussion about abortion a long time ago, because you commented on a thing I posted on Facebook where I do agree abortion is immoral, or rather it's a tragic thing, but I do not believe in people pressuring a 16-year-old girl not to get an abortion because it's morally wrong when they don't realize how stressful and difficult this is for a 16-year-old who doesn't want to go through pregnancy.
I think what you said is that men don't have the ability to comment on them, and I completely disagree with that. I think men have. I mean, that's like saying that nobody can comment on war who isn't a veteran.
That's a good point.
Well, if that's true, then almost nobody would have the right to comment. But war affects people, and here's the deal. And you and I aren't going to agree on that issue, and that's cool, and that's the point.
No,
you should be able to.
I'm trying to negotiate to where I just don't want people to be forceful about whether they agree or disagree with what a young woman decides to do. I do think there is a point where you can no longer get an abortion, and you have to do it in the early stages. I just don't. This is her choice. Because she knows how her life could be.
I think in this context, you would be well served to talk more about your own moral feelings, and to say, I would say, I'm going to bracket off the issue of what should or shouldn't be legal. Mm-hmm. I would make that distinction if I were you, and I would say, I'm bracketing off of what should or shouldn't be legal because I'm not a legal expert. Mm-hmm. So I'm not commenting on that.
Yeah.
So I would.
Mine is so close to the legal context, I don't know how to separate the two.
Well, I don't think that's true. I think what the question is, what does Caitlin believe in terms of right and wrong on the issue? That's a separate issue. Would you, if a 16-year-old came to you and asked you whether you think she should do that, would you say, yes, that's okay, yes, do that. It's perfectly all right for you to do that. Or would you say, I believe that that's wrong and that's not the right decision to make? I would counsel you to make this other decision. That's a separate question of whether or not you think she should be legally allowed to make that decision. So that's the question you have to ask yourself. If a girl comes to you and says, do you think abortion is all right? Because that's what it's going to boil down. That's what it boils down to in a lot of situations. You may say, well, it's complicated, but the question is what does Caitlin believe about the right and the wrong in the situation? And that's not anybody, and nobody here can tell that for you. But if I were you, when I'm talking to these young people, I would make a distinction, which I would bracket off the legal argument altogether. That's what I'm going to do. If I'm talking, I'm going to say I'm bracketing off the question of whether abortion should be legal. I'm going to talk about the morality of the situation for myself. And if Josh was talking about the morality of the situation, I'm going to tell the story of early Christians who went to places when Romans left babies to die in infanticide. Christians picked those babies up and raised them. I think that when the Bible says you are not your own, you were bought at a price. Your body is the temple of God. You belong to the community and you belong to God as much as you belong to yourself or more. That there's implications in that for the morality of abortion. However, I would say, this is something else I would say, anything that upholds the sanctity of life is our moral responsibility. So what holds up the sanctity of life? That doesn't necessarily mean if a mother is facing death because of a tubal pregnancy, absolutely I think abortion is morally permissible. I don't think a mother has to be forced to die to have a child. I think I've known people who had tubal pregnancies and had to have abortions. They were going to die if they brought the child to term, and that's the way it was. That's a morally unanalyzable situation. That is not something that I don't judge that person wrong or evil. Even in the same thing of if a child, I would even, and I'm a little broader than some conservatives, because I would also include if you know that a child is going to be severely mentally retarded, seeing how that can draw a life away, how that can consume a life. If a person said, no, that's not something, all I'm doing is bringing this child in the world to suffer, and that's all there is for this child. Making that decision is a decision I would leave in another person's hands. So for me, it's what upholds the sanctity of life. However, using abortion as birth control, to me, is morally wrong. That's my opinion. And that is how abortion is usually used.
As an oops.
Right.
Yeah.
As a form of birth control. And so that's the line I'm going to draw. If a 16-year-old tells me I was raped by my father, is it okay for me to get an abortion? I'd be like, it's not good. It's because there's no good in this situation. This is evil from beginning to end. That's morally permissible. That's between you and God. And if it is a mistake, I have full confidence that God's going to forgive you for it. And God forgive you for any sin. Anyways, but those are situations in which I was raped. Things like that. Beyond moral analysis for me. And I certainly don't want it to be illegal for that person to make that decision. But if a 16-year-old tells me, me and my boyfriend made a mistake, is it okay for me to get an abortion? I would go, no, it's not. Find adoption, have other options, but you cannot kill that. You cannot kill that unborn baby. It's not a baby yet. It's not a child yet. You cannot kill that unborn baby because you feel like you made a mistake. That's not okay. That's Joshua's opinion. I'm not trying to give these to you. You have to but you see the difference between asking the legal question and asking what Caitlin thinks in that situation. A girl comes to you with that question. Is this morally permissible? Is it morally okay? Do you think it's okay in God's eyes? That's a separate question. And I encourage everybody to bracket off the legal question. Because the truth is the legal question is way more complicated than a yes or no answer. Does that help?
Yeah. Now I have to go write it down to figure it out.
Right. You have to figure out but that's the point. You have to ask yourself what you truly believe about that situation. And it's easy to relieve ourselves of moral duty by appealing to the legal problem. I think it should be legal. I think it should not be. I think it should be illegal in this situation. That's easy for us to argue all day. The hard part is when it's you, and by the way, though this is the only thing I've ever had to deal with, Joshua, that's a very real thing for Joshua to have to ask himself every day. If a child comes and asks me that question, what do I say? I have to be truthful and honest. And that's the question that's being asked for you. I would completely say, there are two questions here, legal, one moral, and I'm going to bracket off the legal question. It means I'm putting the legal question aside because that's above my pay grade. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a political analyst. Those are very complex issues about where power should reside in a society, how much power a government should have, and over what that sphere of power. You can argue about that stuff all day, and there's no answer to it. And there's no one. So I'm going to bracket that question. Now I'm going to ask myself the moral question. If somebody comes to me and asks me this question, what's my response? Well, A, B, C, D. That's how I approach that issue. Is that helpful to you, too? Is that helpful?
I mean, the legal and that distinction was there.
Yeah. I would encourage you in this situation to make that distinction and to frame the moral question as somebody comes to me and asks me, is this okay in God's eyes? And that's how I would respond. And truthfully, if somebody says I was raped, is this okay in God's eyes? My response is, I don't know. I don't know what the hell the right answer is to that. And that's, by the way, that's a perfectly okay answer too. I don't know. You know, there's a guy, there's Dietrich Bonhoeffer. A guy's going to sit there and blow himself up trying to kill Hitler. And he asks him, he says, will I go to heaven? And Bonhoeffer's response is, I don't know. I don't know. He's like, you know, God, I mean, you know, I don't know. And that's because he doesn't know, you know, he knows suicide's wrong. He knows trying to kill Hitler is the best that they can all do. You know, I'm crying because it's such a beautiful moment, such a sad moment. He tells him, I know that God forgives people. He says, I'll pray over you. But what is there to say? If a girl comes to me and says, I was raped, is it okay to abort the child? My response is going to be, I don't know. I don't know. I know that God loves people and forgives people. I mean, those situations become beyond my ability to understand or analyze. I do not believe that God's going to condemn somebody to hell. Do not believe for a second over something like that. So the next thing is gun control. I would say the same thing. There's a difference between a moral and a legal argument, and people of good conscience can disagree about what the legalities of gun control are, but I believe this. Okay, and then you can say whatever you believe. There's no answer from Josh on that issue.
We don't need to lie, right? Whenever they're like, do you own guns? Be like, yes.
Yes, I'm going to tell people I own guns.
Yes.
I'll tell them
I own guns. I've owned guns as long as I can remember. I can't remember a time when I wasn't able to shoot a gun and did not shoot a gun.
My dad grew up hunting. He still owns guns, even if he doesn't.